was thinking yesterday about like what should I talk about today? And I've always got like my running list of things that I think are good to address. And I actually was talking to a friend of mine who was one of my very first clients. I met them at an open house, and we have since become really good friends, and they have sent me lots of business. So shout out to open houses, they do work. Um, but Danny said, you should talk about like what to do with a bad client, which is funny because he was not a bad client. But I thought that was a really good point. One of the things that I find time and again when people ask experienced agents, what do you wish you knew when you started? So often it comes up that they wish they had known when to let go of a bad client or when to move on, and not let that person suck all your energy and life force and time and positivity. And I have had my share, not very many, but I've had a few people who have been really tough customers. And so even though you're new, I think it's still important to recognize that you don't have to just take any business that comes your way, because there are people who will take everything they can squeeze out of you, and it'll leave nothing for anybody else you're working with and what you're trying to put into building your business. So it's an important thing even when you're new. So I think it's a good lesson to learn early. But there are some things to think about because it's hard to define exactly like what's a bad customer or what's somebody who's going to be real trouble. So I've got some pointers for you, some things I've learned over time, some things I've taken from other agents that hopefully will help you to preserve your energy and make sure you're focusing on the people who really appreciate you and are a good fit to work with you and are really going to purchase or sell their home. Um, because it's really easy to get caught in these kind of touch and go, stop and start kind of strange, clunky relationships with people where you're like focusing all your energy on that because it's all you have going on right now. And then you kind of lose sight of everything else. So, this I think will be helpful for that and will allow you to really put your energy into worthwhile relationships, into people who are really serious about needing a real estate agent and are nice for that matter. So a couple of things to note. You may want to take some notes or come back to this later. But so first of all, what's a tough customer? What defines somebody who you may not really in the end see the value in working with? A few things I've learned over time. Number one, they're not ready. Now, this is tricky because you're going to talk to people who are like, hey, I'm thinking about buying a house sometime in the next year or two. And you're like, okay, well, your instinct may be to not put a lot of effort into them. But let me tell you, if you're preparing them properly, a lot of times people who are in that position, if they're financially ready, they just need somebody who's going to take them under their wing, help them understand the process, put their minds at ease. They may be more ready than you think. So that's not necessarily a red flag that they're not ready. Now, if they are a friend of yours and they can't commit to anything for any reason, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be tough working with them to help them buy a house, right? So if they're not serious, if they're not really focused on what to do, if they're, you can kind of tell how somebody takes something seriously or not, right? If they're just like, hey, I like that house is cool. Can we just go see it? Like, I don't really want to, I don't know what I want to do, but that looks neat. I mean, you can gamble and try that out, but I would highly recommend you quickly get them into a buyer consultation to really find out what their motivation is. Maybe they're a bad fit. You know, there are people out there who I often say there's a person for every agent, there's an agent for every person, right? Not every single person is going to be the people that you work best with. That is going to give you so much relief from heartache of being like, oh, that agent has all these clients and oh, they have the people at this price point. Ugh. Just trust that the people you attract are the people you should be working with. And if you're feeling like there is not a good connection happening here, if you're not on the same page, you're not really jiving, listen to that instinct. It is going to be so much harder to work with somebody if you don't get along, right? Like if it's not pleasant, you don't want to call them, you hate interacting with them. Guess what? That whole interaction, that whole process is going to be really uncomfortable, unpleasant. And you can just recognize, like, I don't think we're a good fit, because they feel it too, right? It's like dating. Like they can tell. So if you're in that position where you're like, we've had our buyer consultation, we've gone on some showings, we are just not clicking, take a moment and check in on that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. If they're just straight up mean, like if they don't appreciate you, if they are a jerk, if they say mean things to you, if they do crappy things like waste your time or not show up for showings, not worth your time. That's not how you're going to build a big business. Bowing down to people who are jerks is going to suck your energy. It's going to make you jaded, and you're not going to have all that love for the people who really appreciate working with you. So if they're jerks, you can kick them to the curb. You are as much deciding if you're going to work with them as they're deciding if they're going to work with you. Don't forget that. You have a lot to offer, and there's no reason to be a jerk. Now, I will say, if you don't set expectations, if people aren't prepared to understand how this is going to go, they can get upset and mean, and there are ways to avoid that. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. If they're unrealistic, now you're newer to the market, but you see Charlie's market stats, you have access to MLS, you have some indication of what's happening in the market. Now, if you get a buyer who comes up to you and says, I want a house in Whitefish Bay for 150,000, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, totally remodeled, are they realistic? No. So it's one of two things. Can you get them to the point where they can understand what is truly happening in the market, what is realistic within their price range, with what they want? You can help them understand that, and they're probably going to appreciate you for it. But do that up front. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how that can fold into your buyer agency or buyer consultation or your listing presentation. If you have somebody who's unrealistic and you haven't taken the reins as the expert to help them see what is truly happening, they are going to get so frustrated. You are going to get so frustrated. That's going to be such an energy suck. It's not going to be great for anybody. And that leads me to energy suck. So some people just love taking up your time. Somebody's got their microphone on that they can turn off.
Mindset and focus on work, but like
anybody
this doesn't work when we're both at home. Like,
is that Mandy?
Celia, maybe
Celia. Somebody's got their mic on. Thank you. So that leads me to one more thing. Has anybody watched What We Do in the Shadows? Anybody? Okay, Jesse knows. So this is a story about vampires, but one of the vampires is an energy vampire, and he's like that dude that just wanders around the office with a coffee in his hand and starts talking about stupid things that nobody cares about ad nauseum and just sucks your life force. That guy. Those people are out there and they love to take up your time. They want to talk to you on the phone for 45 minutes. They want you to come over for a listing presentation that takes 2 hours. They do not care if you have other things to do. They just want to take up all your energy. Now, it is hard to figure out if that's worth the trade-off because some people are just needing more attention. But pay attention to that. If you're feeling drained after a conversation with somebody, maybe this isn't someone you should be working with, or maybe this is someone who needs boundaries. So, big things to think about. How they communicate is going to tell you a lot. Or if they don't communicate at all, do you have to pull teeth to get this person to work with you? Probably not worth your time. Maybe you put them on a drip campaign, get them on the MLS subscription, check in once in a while, but don't pour your daily energy into them. Consideration. Are they aware of the fact that you have other things to do? Are they considerate of your time? Do they show up on time? Do they come to their showing appointments? Have they rescheduled last minute your buyer consultation 3 times? Maybe not worth it. And it is so, so hard to let go of people, especially when you're new. But I'm telling you, even now, even with all the business I have, it's so hard for me to let go of people. But you have to, for the benefit of the people who want to work with you, who are considerate, who are great at communicating, who are someone you have a great relationship with that is likely to lead to future business and a pleasant interaction all the way through their transaction. That's who needs your energy and your attention and your love. So if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for them. Effort. Are they making an effort? Did you ask them to fill out a little brainstorming page about what they're looking for in a new home? Did you give them information for great lenders and they haven't done anything with it yet? Did you ask them to send a reply, hey, what do you think of this house? And they haven't sent anything and it's been over a day. If they're not making the effort, then your effort should not be tremendously beyond what they're putting in. Now, this does get a little complicated if you've got a couple. There may be one person who's more taking the reins on it. You know, kind of go with that. Go with your leader of the two, keeping in touch and in mind and the other person in the loop. But you may get a little bit of that. So, but think about that. If they're really not making an effort, then, you know, don't show them 10 houses before they're willing to sit down for a buyer consultation. They're just using you to get into houses, right? If they don't want to sign buyer agency, but they want you to give them advice on something, legally, you can't. And also it's a waste of your time and energy. So be really aware of where people are with the effort they're putting in versus what you're putting in. And then take a step back once in a while and kind of reevaluate. So how do you avoid creating tough customers? Because we do that sometimes. There are a lot of agents out there who don't do buyer consultations, and then all they do is complain about how they're running all over town with someone who showed them 25 houses and they haven't even I wrote an offer, it was way under asking, they just totally don't get it. Well, did you take the time to sit down and explain to them what the market's doing? Because if you didn't, they probably don't know. So it's real easy to complain and moan about people when you haven't taken the time to put them in the best position possible. So buyer consultation, buyer consultation, buyer consultation. Do it. It is worth the time. You can do them on Zoom now and it's socially acceptable. You can do them, you know, safely distanced outside on a patio in person, whatever works for you and for them, but it is absolutely worth the time to sit down and meet with them. Same thing with listing presentations. This isn't just your chance to sell yourself and how you're going to service their listing, how you're going to make that house sell for the best price possible and the smoothest transaction possible, the least amount of effort and problems for them. You also are finding out if you want to list their house, right? A totally unrealistic listing is just your name on a sign forever that never sells in a market where everything sells. That's not great either. So really taking the time to qualify people is worthwhile. And a lot of that is setting expectations. So helping people understand how you operate, what they can expect from you. This, for a buyer consultation, is the perfect time to talk about buyer agency. Get that over with right away. Don't wait until you're writing an offer, because you only know if you legally can give advice, can negotiate on their behalf, can point out reasons not to buy on your showings if you have buyer agency. If you don't, you work for the seller. So do your due diligence, take the time to set expectations. What does it mean for me to be your buyer's agent? And hey, here's the coolest part. The seller pays my commission. So I'm setting the expectation right away. Don't worry about calling me for a showing. Don't call the Zillow agent or go to the open house because you're worried you're going to have to pay me. I get paid at closing. It's a commission from the seller. Here's how it works. I've set the expectation. Everyone's on the same page. Drama avoided, right? Explain a little bit about procuring cause. If you want to see a property, I want to be there as your representative. So even if there's an open house, call me. I'll meet you there. I'll get you in before the open house. It's important that you know, buyer, if you want to see a property and you don't see it with me, the person you see it with may be the person you have to write your offer with. And if you trust and want to work with me, then I've got to be your person there for your showing. So setting that expectation, right? That's one of those things that frustrates people. And then can you believe it? They called, they went on Zillow and they wrote an offer and I've showed them 30 houses and I can't believe this crap. Well, did you explain to them how this works? Because they probably don't know. Nobody talks about procuring costs. It makes us look really greedy. So figure out a way to spin it and make it to their advantage. Setting expectations, huge, 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 huge. Keeps you from getting upset. It keeps them from getting upset. We all know what to expect. We're on the same page. It's not a one-time thing either, but this is a big opportunity at the beginning when you meet with them. And then continue to set those expectations, what to expect. Here's what's coming. Here's what could happen. This is probably what the market's doing. Here's how your offer is going to have to be to get a chance at getting it accepted. Set those expectations. Communicating regularly. This is on you and it can be hard. Last week we talked about the fear of success and how that can freeze you. This is where I get stuck. I get a great client, they seem awesome, I'm super excited. There's something holding me back and I don't follow through. I give them the sign buyer agency, I send them a link to MLS to do searches on their own, and then I don't set up their subscription right away. And then a week goes by and I start to feel really bad about it. And then I haven't checked in with them in a few days and I probably should. And then I start to feel worse and worse and worse. Well, that's not regular communication. So if I find out that they like went out and wrote an offer with a different agent, I shouldn't be surprised. So regular communication of checking in to see how they're doing. Once a week, make it a block in your schedule. You know, Wednesdays at 1, I'm going to check in with anybody I consider an active client. Hey, do you want to see some houses this weekend? Hey, how are you feeling about the listings I sent you? Hey, how are you feeling about the search? Are you worried about what the market's going to do? You know, have you gotten your pre-approval lined up? All those things. Checking in regularly to hold them accountable to make sure they do the not so fun stuff like the pre-approval is helpful. You're there to help keep them on track. You're the expert. They're leaning on you and they've got a lot of distractions, right? So constant, regular, predictable communication is important. When it comes to a listing, that means you're checking in every week, whether there's news or not, right? So we only had one showing this week. We didn't get any feedback. Well, that doesn't mean you don't reach out to them. You still need to communicate with them because the less they hear from you, the angrier they're going to get. They're going to start making stuff up in their head about how you're doing nothing to sell their house and you're doing all these things, but you haven't communicated that to them. So communication, super huge to not creating monsters. Checking in. So this is not just communicating about what's going on in the process. I think it's really easy for us, especially when you're new and you're learning the process to some extent as you go as well. So it's easy to really get hyper focused on that. It's important that you take a moment to step back and remember that they're people and so are you. So just ask them how they're doing. People really appreciate that. It's an emotional time, you know, whether it's exciting or it's sad or it's stressful, it's a lot of emotions. And right now, this year, emotions are like turned up to max volume, right? So something that maybe a year ago wouldn't have been as big of a deal, this year can blow up a transaction because people just spiral. So checking in and seeing how they're doing emotionally will help you avoid a blow up from them aimed at you or aimed at the other party or the process. It's such a good thing to do once in a while to just say like, hey, person to person, how are you feeling about this? Because you can probably help put their minds at ease. You can probably answer that question that's been spinning around in their head and worrying them. No matter how many times you tell somebody, I'm always here for you. I'm happy to answer your questions. There's no stupid questions. People will build it up in their mind that they have a dumb question, that they don't want to bother you, and then they'll just spin about it until they are ready to explode. And then you'll find out about it when they explode. So just checking in and seeing how they're doing emotionally can be really worthwhile too, and help you avoid them becoming that client that you don't want to work with. So if you've had little bits of problems along the way, but it's tolerable and you really don't have any other business going on. You just want to make this happen, but it's getting kind of bad or it's starting to slip down that path. This is a great time to regroup. This is what I usually call my come to Jesus talk. So I go back to my days of running restaurants where I've had a server who's done like a few things that aren't great and we've got little complaints, but it hasn't been the end of the world. It was a busy night or whatever. And finally, it's to the point where like, I need to nip this in the bud and get us back on track or we're going to have problems. It's that conversation. And it's very likely that they are dying to have that conversation too. So if you've gotten to the point where things are weird, maybe you've written multiple offers, you've had no success getting those offers accepted, or you've tried to look at houses and they've been late the last 2 times or 3 times, or you tried to schedule a showing and they were like, cool, can we go next week? And you were like, no, man, this market is fast. We got to go today or tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, I just want to go next week. Like if that keeps happening, then it's time to have a regroup. And ask them if they're willing to do it through Zoom or maybe even in person. Maybe you just check in after a showing or something like that. But that's your chance to get things back on track. If you feel things veering off course, they're getting a little weird, you're becoming less psyched about working with this person, they might be feeling the same way about you. So it's a good opportunity to just say, let's pump the brakes for a second and just check back in. Let's revisit some of the stuff we talked about in our buyer consultation. Let's revisit how you're feeling. Let's revisit what the market's doing. You know, we're moving into a new season. Let's talk about what we can expect from that. You've got great information from Charlie every Tuesday about what the market's doing. And that may be the dose of reality you need to say, let's check back. Or it may be your chance to say, you know, I kind of let it go for a while, letting them see if what they think they can get for this price is out there and it's really not. And I haven't really stressed that too much because I didn't want to be too pushy at the beginning. This is your time to say, okay, so are you noticing, you know, we're not quite getting what you're looking for at this price point? Do we bump up our price? Do we change our location? Do we adjust our expectations? What can we do moving forward to reach a successful outcome? That's a great opportunity to do that, highly worth the time, and they will appreciate it. And if they're not going to take the time to have that meeting with you, that is a sure sign that they are not appreciating what you're doing for them. And it may be the time to cut them off. So if it's time to cut ties, what do you do and how? So this can be very case by case, obviously, but I think the important thing to keep in mind is, what is the reason this isn't working? Can we address this reason? It's not about me versus them. It's about, you know, what is the thing that's kind of tripping us up? If it's that personality clicking, maybe this is your opportunity to refer them to another agent that you think would be a better fit for them. And you can be very honest and say, my goal, you know, your goal is to purchase a new home along these lines and this price point. And, you know, I've done my best to help with that, but I really feel like maybe this isn't working because there's another agent who's better suited for you. And I've got a couple of people who I think would be really great. And I just want to make sure that you're getting an excellent experience. Now, this could wake them up to realize that they've been a pain in the butt to work with and they need to adjust and they really do want to work with you. Or maybe they're going to be grateful that, you know, this doesn't feel like it's working. And thank goodness you have somebody else who may be a good fit. Also, then you can get a referral fee. So at least you'll get something for your time when they finally close on something, right? Like usually 25% of the buyer agent commission would come to you. Make sure you ask that before you send anybody over to that agent, and maybe give them a couple people to choose from to interview, but that may be one solution. Now, if they're terrible, clearly don't want to buy something, or just wasting your time, you don't want to refer them to another agent necessarily. That's kind of a crappy thing to do, or at least warn them. But if it really seems like they're just not going to work with anybody, that's the time to have that conversation. You know, it feels like maybe this timing isn't the best for you, or perhaps what you're seeking is not available in this market. You know, this is what you're looking for. This is what we've done so far. Be very factual about it. non-judgmental. Don't put your feelings on everything. Just, this is what we tried. This, this worked, this didn't work. Here's where we are right now. It's feeling like we're at a point where maybe this isn't working out. And perhaps it means that it's something to table until, 3 months from now or 6 months from now. Would it be okay if I check in then? Or, this really doesn't seem to be working out. I wish you all the best on your next steps in this home search journey. Here's an amendment for our buyer agency to cancel it, or maybe it's time to take the house off the market if they're just not realistic about the price they can get for it, if they're not cooperating with showings. Just be very factual, keep it simple and short and non-emotional, and try to be as positive and gracious as possible. Cutting them off, in a gentle way is better than telling them to take a hike, right? That could come back around. So being really thoughtful about how you're approaching that, I think, is important, because you don't want, you like barely are starting your reputation. You'd hate for the first thing that comes out to be something crummy about how you told somebody to hit the road. So that is really the best way to go about it, in my opinion. And if you're having trouble with a client, it doesn't hurt to kind of troubleshoot that through some other agents. We have plenty of people in our office who are happy to talk about it. The helpline is a great opportunity of Andy Stillman and Stephanie Minnick to talk about that with. If you're calling me about accountability and we've been touching base about how things are going through a transaction, that may be a time to talk about it. You could ask the Peanut Gallery through our Facebook page, but you may get more generalized answers instead of something specific to this situation. But we're all here to help and give you some feedback and kind of speaking from our experience. Everybody gets crummy clients at some point in time. Some people hang on to them way longer than they should. I can speak from experience. I had a couple in I think it was my 4th year, who it seemed great. They had a condo to sell. They wanted to buy a house up to 500,000. They seemed cool. They had a cute little kid. Like, I thought we were great. It was a referral from somebody I really respect and wanted to build a relationship with. And for that reason, I hung on to them way too long. And they destroyed all of my other business for like 6 months because all my time and energy went into them. If that's what you're experiencing, this is something you need to think about. Do we have a regroup? Do I refer them? Do I cut them off? Do we, set a time frame to check back later? It is really worth being aware of that. Not everybody you work with is going to be super tough. There are going to be people you work with who are tougher to work with, but it's worth it. So if you're in a situation where you're like, I don't know, is this normal? How's this going? Like, listen to your gut. If it's really awful, it's probably worth considering alternatives. And, then you have that time and energy to really focus on other people, building your business, all the things you need to be working on. You've got to give yourself some energy and time for that too. So that is something I cannot tell you how often it comes up when people say, what do you wish you knew when you were new in real estate? What do you wish you could have told yourself when you started in real estate? Time and again, this comes up. So it sounds really obvious and like something you'll never be in a position of, having to deal with, but you will. And it's just a matter of how you handle it and whether they truly are a trouble client or it's something that you can do to make it a better situation, because truly they're gonna know too. You don't want to drag somebody kicking and screaming through this process when they're really not feeling it either. So we've got a half hour to open it up for questions. I want to start with any questions related to this specific topic, and then I can open it up to other things too.
Amanda, can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. My mic wasn't working before. By the way, across from my apartment where I'm living, there's a list, one of your listings. I drove past the sign the other day. I said, I know her.
Yeah.
Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're closing this week.
Yeah. So I don't have any clients yet, so I don't know how to blow them off, but
Well, it's good to know how to qualify them,
Yeah.
right? Like you can tell when someone's going to be a pain, and even if they're a friend and you're like, or like a family member, oof, you're like, oh, cousin Larry is the worst, and now he wants me to sell his house. Do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
Maybe it's worth it.
I buyer consultation. I mean, I've done, working in a library, I do work with students all the time. And we do, when they're working on a research project, there's a series of questions you have to go through to find out what it is, they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, what they need to find, and all that kind of stuff. I'm assuming that the buyer consultation that you're referring to is very similar, the same thing. What are you looking for? It's just
Yep.
the right questions to find out the information you need to service the individual.
Yeah, so there's a video about buyer consults from one of my past launch classes, so highly recommend watching that. There's also an outline in command for a buyer consultation, so it's a good place to start. Janine's done one before as well in productivity. Essentially, the goal of that meeting is to introduce yourselves to each other, so build that rapport and trust,
Okay.
to understand what their goals are, so like timeline, what they're looking for, price point, whether they've bought a home before or not, just sort of understanding where they're coming from, and then setting the expectations of what you're going to do for them and how the process is going to work, and as like a brief overview. You don't want to overwhelm them. And also, what is the market doing right now, which is a big piece. So that's essentially how that works, and then setting a plan to move forward. It's really best to get them to sign buyer agency in that meeting or send it right after. And then that's your jumping off point. So I have a page that I like take notes on when I meet with them. It's kind of like an interview page, and I file that and I go back to it when I'm looking for homes for them. And if we hit a bump in the road, when I'm trying to remember who their lender is, all that stuff, I go back to that page.
Is there on the YouTube channel? Is there like role plays of that, or I mean, is there anything that's on video?
I have a video where I walk through the whole thing and talk about all the parts of it. It's not a role play, but I don't think Janine's is a role play either, but I'm not certain of that. I'm trying to remember. We've done those in the past in class, but I think the one that I did, I just talked through the whole thing. But that's a good idea to do at some point.
Well,
do you know what it's called so I can find it? Sorry.
I think it's just called buyer consultation. It's labeled. It's one of the ones
on the
labeled.
YouTube channel.
Yep,
Okay.
It's a launch class. I think it was in like March or April, maybe. Yeah.
One last
good question.
Quick question, and then I'll let other people talk. Scripts. So just like how to breach the subject with somebody. A completely cold situation. How do you breach that subject? Are there scripts for that, or just how do you get the process started? That's what I'm wrestling with right now. It's like, in fact, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. It's like, okay, what's step one?
As far as getting someone to schedule a buyer consult?
I got my license and I studied and I got all this knowledge in my head. Now I want to start the business, and it's just like, okay, I feel like a fish out of water flopping around on the sidewalk. It's just like, okay, what's step one? What do I do next? What's my next step? What's my game plan?
Yeah, so you're getting all the emails, which are kind of outlining all the opportunities and resources. When it comes to where to focus your attention, there's something called the top 5, and it's in one of the emails you get, and you can also search top 5 in the launch Facebook group, and you'll see a little video of me explaining all the 5 items. Okay. But essentially it's practice writing an offer to purchase. So watch the videos where I explain it, watch Kimmy's video, write up a fake one and schedule an appointment with Andy Stillman through the helpline to go through it. Okay. You could do that as a group. I think Celia did that not too long ago, or was it Reagan? Somebody just did that a couple of weeks ago. Practice, read it, understand that offer and how it translates into real life. That's huge. That is one of the biggest hurdles I see people have as they, get their business cards and they do their website, and then some business pops up and they're like, oh crap, I don't know how to write an offer. And then they're like afraid to take them on showings because good God, I might have to write an offer. So prepare in advance. Understand that offer. You will be a 10 times better agent than most of the people out there if you understand how the offer works. Having your buyer consultation set up. So that could just be an outline. It could be a whole booklet you give them. It's going to change over time. It doesn't have to be perfect, but have something to start with so you feel confident meeting with somebody. Same thing for a listing presentation. That is also available as an outline in Command, and there are videos about how to put that together as well. Also, any of these things you could ask any agent in the office if you would be able to shadow or observe.
Yeah,
it's a little tricky with COVID, but in some cases you can.
I'm making some connections with people that, you know, that can help me with that.
Good, that's great. Our community here is extremely supportive and open. So if there's an agent you really admire or you see where they're doing a lot of business, you check them out on MLS and you're like, oh man, Amanda works in condos a lot and I really want to do condos. Well, then reach out, you know, or like, oh man, Maureen Saleh's team does all this great business in luxury in the North Shore and I'm in Whitefish Bay and that's where I want my business to be. Like, ask questions. Find the more you do research, the less work you make for the person you're reaching out to, the more successful you're going to be in getting help from them. You know, like, hey, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Here's my question. I've done my research. I know your background. Can you give me some info on this?
Yeah,
You're more likely to get better feedback that way.
You mentioned MLS, the listing services. You know, I signed up, I got my login and all that stuff, but is there some instructional videos on how to utilize that?
Yeah, so we actually had some here. So they're on our YouTube page. Also, MLS offers classes all the time. So if you go on the main page of MLS before you sign in, you can find videos and I don't think they're doing in-person classes right now, but they've got a ton of video tutorials on how to use things in there. And then we've also had some done just for our office that are on the YouTube page. Messing around in MLS is a really good thing to do while you have some time. Okay. Understanding the basics of like a CMA, a market analysis to have for a listing presentation. Janine did a class on that. It's something that you should know how to do before you get a potential listing. So that's a good thing to kind of play around in. I still don't know everything MLS does. I definitely could benefit from watching more of those classes and trying more things, but I've got the basics down and I'm able to do a ton of business with just that. So playing around in there is not a bad idea, and understanding how to do a CMA or a comparative market analysis is part of your top 5 for your listing presentation. Okay. Also understanding the listing contract, practice it, read through it, understand what it means. How do other agents utilize that? Definitely important, because if you're sitting in front of a potential client talking about signing on with you, you better know what's in that document.
All right. A quick question.
Same thing. Yep.
Is there, if, for example, in the study materials, there were, you know, problems. There were story problems in the study materials for the exam. Is there any of that available, or you just make up your own stuff?
Not specifically, no. I mean, you could make up your own things. There's a class series called Ignite. I think you just missed it. There's another one starting in January. Yep. That's going to be a huge help to a number of things you can do for your business. But before then, you could work on these top 5.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Tom.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good question. So I, and this kind of ties in with, you know, what we're talking about here, but I went to the bank and I was just closing an account that I didn't need. And I struck up a conversation with the banker about where he was from. And he said he was just moved here from Michigan. And then I said, oh, well, and I said, have you been looking in the market? Are you buying? Did you buy a home here? And he said, no, we're renting right now, but we're looking. And I said, oh, that's awesome. Do you have a realtor? And he said, no, we're just kind of looking on Zillow and we're kind of just, and so I kind of want to know, all right, so I broached the subject. I found out a bunch of information about him and his life. and and I know that him and his wife are looking for a house, but it's the way that he said is we're not, we're not sure, we're, not right now, but we're kind of looking. And, my wife's just looking on Zillow. How do I, so I got his email, got his phone number. I plan on putting him kind of in the pipeline of like staying in touch with him.
Mhm.
At what point do you know that you should get serious about like, hey, why don't we just like, do I just say, hey, why don't we just sit down and do a preliminary consultation just to figure out if what type of information I can send over? Or like, how do you know to convert that they're ready for the buyer consultation?
So if they're willing to tell you that they're looking, but they're kind of hesitant about it, they could be
Yeah.
ready. They might not
Okay.
be. The key is when you're offering like a consultation,
Mhm.
if I say to you, hey, why don't we set up a time to sit down and have a consultation? Do you want to do that with me? Does that sound appealing to you?
No.
Not really.
No.
So it has to come from contribution. The benefit to you, that's what people want to hear, right? So you are marketing yourself. So if you talk to somebody in that situation, which comes up all the time,
Yeah.
what you can say is, it's been kind of a crazy market, but I've got some really good pointers to help you work through it. Why don't we, before you're feeling ready, why don't we kind of set you up for success with, I've got some helpful information. Would you mind like setting up a Zoom for like a half hour? And I can just help you kind of set the pace and make a plan so that when you're ready, you'll be ready to really compete in this crazy market.
Okay. And
Clearly you
then
have the lending side down, you're at a bank, but if you need lenders or you need contacts
Right.
for anything, I've got all that too. But saying like, I'm here as a resource and I'm helpful, and why don't we do something for you to benefit you? Not like, can you meet with me? I want you to meet with me. You see how
Right.
different that message is?
Very. Okay.
So,
So
and I tell you all the time, I talk to people who are like, we're like thinking about it, or we're like a year
yeah.
out, or we're just looking. And then 2 weeks later, we have an accepted offer. Like if they really truly have their finances lined up and they just need that push to get the pre-approval, they just need somebody to help them understand what the next steps are, what the process is to make it less scary, then they'll jump pretty quick once they feel secure in understanding what is coming and they've got somebody in their corner.
And so when you then do that via Zoom, are you doing essentially your buyer consultation, or are you sending preliminary? But you're just saying, I'm just going to go straight for it. And at the end of it, they should know whether they want to sign or not.
Yeah, I mean, I would come at it from more of a information gathering standpoint. So to say like, I just want to kind of understand where you're coming from so that I make sure whatever I'm talking about is going to best address what your the information that's going to be helpful to you. So, is this your first time buying? Okay, have you looked on Zillow? How's that gone? Have you gone to any open houses? Have you seen houses in person yet? Okay, cool. I love going on showings. So just so you know, if there's anything you want to see, even if you're not ready yet, I'm totally game to go.
Okay.
You may have noticed, if you talk to friends or people in the market, have you noticed on Zillow houses are going really fast? Well, here's what's happening in the market. So I'm setting those expectations. I'm helping them understand what's going on. And by the way, this time of year, generally the prices are a little bit lower than they are the rest of the year. Now we know this is going to be a stronger, busier winter than we've seen maybe ever, because that's how the fall was compared to previous falls, but it could still be a good opportunity. So, if you're feeling like something amazing pops up and it seems like a good opportunity, like this might be a good time of year to do it if it works for you. Just want to put that out there. You're just planting little seeds so they understand, because they don't want to get to spring and be like, dang, I wish Nia had told us if we had bought a house in December, it wouldn't have been 20 offers, it would have been 5, just
Yeah.
be very forthright about that.
Okay.
The
Perfect.
key is you can't let them, I hate this term, but it's very appropriate. Well, it paints a very vivid picture. Do not have commission breath. When you talk to somebody, do not push them as though you just need that check, because they will smell it and they will go running, right?
Yeah.
When someone's trying to hard sell you something and it's really not to your benefit, it's to theirs. So be conscious of how you're approaching it, the words you're using, the angle you're coming at. Are you truly here to help them, or are you trying to get business for yourself? They will be able to tell.
Perfect. Thank
And
you.
usually, you're welcome. Naturally, people have their guard up, right? When you meet somebody and you're like, oh God, they're going to try to sell me something. So coming at it from an unexpected angle of like, oh, I'm here to help you. And also like, I don't need your business because I'm great at this, but I can help you if you want me to work with you, whatever works for you. Let's try to set up a time, or what can I, what resources can I give you? And if we have buyer agency, which by the way, doesn't cost you anything, then I can find houses off market for you. And in this crazy market, finding houses off market is really important. And I'm connected to the biggest, most productive office in the greater Milwaukee area. So I have connections to listings before they come out. And I can only legally share them with you if we have buyer agency.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Everybody will sign on for that.
I know. Okay.
Cool. Good question. Anybody else? Questions related to bummer clients or anything else as far as getting your business going, where you're at this point? Don't forget that we have great resources in the launch program. So you can set up a time to have an accountability call with me. It's a 20-minute check-in. Text me to set up the time. And what we do is we talk about where you are with your goals, where you are with your top 5, where you are with a certain client. It's your time to have that accountability to make sure that you're doing what you should be doing. And I'm here to give you a little bit of advice as well. So that's a worthwhile thing that a lot of people don't take advantage of. But the people who have on this call, I think, would say that it is worthwhile. Also, the helpline, which leads to Andy Stillman and Stephanie Minnick's phones, use the helpline number to reach them. Texting is a great idea with an initial question. They don't always catch the voicemail right away. And let them know if it's a 411 for information or if it's a 911 emergency. Avoid getting yourself in a position where you're like, OMG, I've never looked at the offer to purchase since my test, and I have a client and it's 8 p.m. on Sunday and I'm writing an offer and I have to turn it in an hour, and now I need Stephanie's help on this offer. Don't do that to them. Don't do that to yourself or your client. Prepare in advance. But they are there to help with all kinds of questions, or to set up a time to meet in person or through Zoom to like go through the offer, go through the listing contract, those sorts of things. As we've mentioned, the YouTube channel is a great resource, and they're going through and labeling things now. They're not completely labeled, but most of the launch classes are. Some productivity, the contract classes with Kimmy. You guys, the amount of education and helpful info that you get here and no other broker offers is insanely awesome. So take advantage of it. If you're newer, know that if you haven't been to Ignite yet, that's going to be starting up in January. So you'll have a chance to go to those classes and hear from all different super successful agents in our office, people on teams, people who are independent agents, coming from all different backgrounds and experiences, who have really excellent information. If you're not sure about that, you can talk to some other people who have taken Ignite, or ask on the Facebook group. Use the Facebook group. If you have questions about things, I highly recommend going to our office Facebook group, using the search icon to search for something before you put a question on there, because there's probably someone else who's asked it before, and you can read the answers that are there and kind of proceed as necessary. Coming into the office, put on a mask, sit at a library table, work on some stuff. You can overhear things going on. You can observe how a closing works. You can, bump into other agents or set a time to meet with somebody safely. So that's worth doing as well. It's not quite the energy we usually have here, especially not on a Tuesday morning, but there are still some resources for you here as well. So it's worth doing, using the space you have, if that works for you. And we will have some updates to the launch program as well, something that will help you, especially when you're brand new, kind of navigating like, what do I do next? But I will tell you that part of that is going to require that you practice the offer to purchase. So if you haven't done that, put it on your to-do list this week and do it. Do it a few times. Really familiarize yourself with that. I can't tell you how many times my clients gotten an accepted offer because I wrote just straight up clean offer that made sense, which is sad, but it's true. So if you understand that document, you're steps ahead of other agents. Your buyer is steps ahead of other buyers. You're going to better be able to present offers to your sellers. It is very, very worth your time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So first week, telling everyone I'm a realtor now. And obviously, you know, some friends are excited. They want to use me, but maybe they are either already in a buyer agency agreement before obviously knowing I was becoming a realtor, or someone, a realtor, has been like showing them around, or maybe even just sending them listings, but they don't have an agreement. I obviously like don't want to come in and be stepping on other people's toes right away or upsetting everyone. And I know, you know, if they have a buyer agency agreement, I tell them, you know, I'm sorry, I can't really work with you if you've already signed with someone. How can I handle those types of situations? Either they have a buyer agency and want to work with me, or they don't have a buyer agency but have been kind of talking with someone already.
So when it comes to buyer agency, be super careful. If they have buyer agency, you cannot give them advice on how to break up with that agent. Cannot. So I would just be very forthright. And this is a tricky situation to be in, but you can say, you know, you have this agreement with this agent. If you do not want to work with them, I'm not allowed to give you advice on how to end that relationship. You know, you can talk to them, you can consult an attorney, you can look at the document you signed with them. I really can't give you any advice on how to end that relationship, which is killing me, but legally I could get in a lot of trouble for doing that. So I have to leave it to you to decide how you want to approach that. As far as not having buyer agency, you know, shame on that agent, first of all. Who's wasting their time? If they're consistently in touch with that person about a specific house they showed them, that is procuring cause. So if you have a friend who's like, I've been working with this agent, looking at places, I really think we're going to write an offer on this other place, but I'd rather do it with you. That's going to be tricky. You know, that's when you probably have to talk to that agent directly and say, hey, you know, they want to write an offer on this place. Best case scenario, your friend does the talking because they have a relationship already. It may mean that you have to write a referral fee out to them. It may mean that they're not okay with you writing the offer. Ultimately, it's what your friend wants, but if that agent is being a stickler about it, it may get kind of ugly. If it's not a specific house and they've just been looking at places or they've been getting MLS emails and they would rather work with you, you know, best case scenario, that other agent knows what's going on, right? You'd hate to be that agent in that position where suddenly somebody ghosts you and then you see they got an accepted offer. But they didn't bother to get a buyer agency agreement with them. And, you know, if they're not happy with how that's going, they can work with you. I've had people leave their agents to work with me before. It's just, you know, this community, even though there's tons of agents, it's pretty small. So you don't want to leave an agent with a bad taste in their mouth as best you can. You know, ultimately it's what your friend wants. So if they are comfortable going to them and saying, you know, I'm not going to work with you anymore, or if they really haven't heard from them and all they're getting is automatic emails and nothing else, then that agent's kind of checked out. You know, if they haven't heard from them in over a week, and this is good for you to know from the other side, right? Like if you think you've got somebody locked in, well, they don't have buyer agency, all you're doing is sending them auto emails and you haven't done anything else. You haven't talked to them in weeks. There's a good chance they're going with somebody else. So that does happen. I generally leave it up to that buyer to handle, unless it's an agent I know. But if they have buyer agency, and even if they don't, I would be very, very careful about giving people advice about how to break up with their agent. That's also true if you know somebody who has a listing contract. You really shouldn't be talking to that seller. That is hot water. And if they want to leave their agent and work with you, you really shouldn't be giving them advice on any of that. That will get you landed in arbitration. That means you're in a court setting with the WRA, and you could get fined, you could lose your license, you could get in all kinds of trouble. It's not worth it. So just be honest with that person. I really want to help you. It would be super cool if we could work together. Unfortunately, in these situations, it comes down to how the buyer decides to handle it. I really can't give you advice on what to do. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, I had somebody who got all hot and bothered, and we were supposed to meet in a week, and they tried to see a duplex, and then they've just, honestly, they're an acquaintance, but they've been like, it's been a disaster because they're so impulsive, and I'm kind of glad I dodged that bullet, to be honest. Good question. Anybody else? Did you find this helpful?
Yeah, the practice forms, those are all in Command, correct? The offers to purchase?
For the offer, they're in zip forms. Just use zip forms. Just call it test.
Test. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, just use zip forms. You'll get used to it.
Got it. All right.
Like send it to your friend and have them practice signing, or send it to yourself to see what, pops up when you have to sign something.
Gotcha.
Yeah, may as well get used to zip forms.
Gotcha.
Cool. Well, I hope this was helpful. It is so hard to tell if people are into what I'm talking about or not when it's on Zoom, especially when I don't see your faces, but hopefully this was worthwhile. Definitely something to keep in mind, even when you're new, even when you're hungry for business. Your tolerance for shenanigans may be higher right now because you really want the business, and that's fine, but just be conscious of where your energy and time is going. You have plenty to be doing right now, not just sitting around waiting for business. There are a lot of things you could be doing to set yourself up for success, get your systems in place, get your bearings, feel really confident. Don't get distracted by shiny objects. It doesn't matter if you have a Facebook page yet, or if you do, just like start it and then work on other stuff. You don't have to have a logo. You don't have to have a snazzy web page. Like, they give us a web page that's great all on its own. So don't get distracted by that stuff. That doesn't make great real estate agents. People who understand the contracts, who know how to talk to clients, who understand the process, who have their systems in place to best take care of their clients, those are great real estate agents. So don't worry about all the other stuff, even though it's fun. You'll get there. You'll get that stuff done eventually. It's not the end of the world. I have all kinds of stuff I still want to do. But when it comes down to it, it's how do I use my time? How do I use my energy? Am I setting goals? Am I checking in on and measuring them? And am I doing these things to build relationships with people, to best take care of them, to do my job with integrity, to take a little time to research if I don't understand something. I'm not making stuff up. That's the important stuff. There's all kinds of stuff that I could be doing otherwise, but the real job is what you should be focusing on right now.
One last question before you go. On these forms, if I do a couple of practice exercises in the zip form, can I send them to you to look at to make sure that I'm not getting into bad habit, or just like
so when you do that, set up a time on the helpline to go over it with Andy.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And there's a 2-part class series from launch where I go through every bit of the offer. It's the older document. It's been updated since, but it's almost exactly the same. It shouldn't be that dramatically different. You can still follow along. And I can't remember if I had a specific address listed with that, but you could fill one out and then follow along with that first. I'd recommend doing the videos before you meet with Andy, so you have some, so it's not totally fresh and new.
All right. Yeah. Those are on the YouTube site.
Yes, and they're labeled.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That accountability call, the 20-minute accountability call, how often can we do that with you? Like, what did you say?
You
one
can do it
time?
once a week if you want.
Once a week.
Yeah,
Okay.
right now I don't
Cool.
have enough people taking advantage of it to limit it. So, but it's up to you. I treat it as an appointment. So you text me to set up the time. I put it in Google Calendar. You call me when we're supposed to have the appointment. I try to keep it to 20 minutes. And if you want to set up another one, it's up to you to do that. So I really leave it in your court, because that's how you run your own business. But I'm here to, keep you accountable. Sometimes it's just helpful to say, like, I'm going to call you next week. Let's set up a time. Okay, by that time next week, I'm going to have this of my 5 things done. I'm going to have this one of my top 5 done by next week. And it just gives you a deadline. And sometimes that's all you need. Accountability is an important piece.
Huge.
I have accountability still. I need it. It's the only way to stay on track. All right, cool. So if you want to text me to set up a time for that, here's my number: 414-534-7982. 414-534-7982. I usually schedule a few days ahead, maybe a week ahead, depending on what I have going on. Right now, I'm not as busy as I was earlier this year. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope you got some good info from this. I highly recommend going back to the videos in the YouTube channel. If there's something you're looking for, use the website, use your resources. We're all here to help. There's a lot of great information for you. You're not alone. Lean on each other. And I'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you so much.
Amanda.
Thanks.
You.
Thank you.